gives me a really great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who is Melanie Fitzpatrick. Melanie has been working with the Union of Concerned Scientists. There's many people like me who are really retread biologists who call ourselves climate change scientists. But Melanie really is a climate change scientist. She's the real goods. She did her PhD in the geophysics of climate change. I guess that qualifies her. She's done a lot of work in the Antarctic and in the Arctic on climate change. She now works for UCS, and UCS recently brought out a report called Confronting Climate Change in the Northeast. It's about 2 years old now, I think, and it's a really valuable report in that it updates what we know about how climate is going to change in New England over the next century. And if you haven't got a hold of a copy or read that report, I'd recommend it to you. It's a really good report, and no doubt some of the stuff in that report will be coming out in Melanie's talk. Melanie, where are you? There she is. I'll hand you over to Melanie Fitzpatrick.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I won't say anything about your accent, Hector. But I do want to thank Bernie for giving us an introduction from Woody Allen. Yes, there's despair on one hand and extinction on the other, but I hope we're going to take a middle path somewhere. And it's really up to the people in this room. We're at a critical point in human history. Certainly, it's been an interesting couple of 100 years. We're the first species to have dug up ancient sunlight in the form of coal and oil, and to have burned it, and to have really increased the heat-trapping blanket around the Earth. And you and I, certainly in our modern lifestyles, are responsible for that. And we're really here to find out what solutions we have and what we can do going forward. It's a two-step process. The first step is that we really need to reduce our emissions. And the time frame to do that is becoming shorter and shorter. The science tells us that it's more and more urgent. And really, we're not going to be able to adapt unless we do reduce those emissions. So we need to mitigate as our first step. And our second step, unfortunately, is to adapt to the changes that are already underway. So what I'd like to do is give you an overview of the report that we brought out last year, and to show you some of the on-the-ground projections for what might change in Massachusetts, and to give you some idea of the different sectors that may be affected. This report was put out by the Union of Concerned Scientists and a collaboration of over 50 scientists across the Northeast. It was based on peer-reviewed published scientific papers, and it looked at a geographical spread and a sectoral analysis of the different areas that would be impacted by climate. The report will be over on a table after this talk, and we brought out state summaries for 9 of the Northeast states, from Pennsylvania through to Maine. This is all on our website if you'd like to take a look as well. Now, climate is already changing globally. We're seeing the changes on the ground, and certainly in the Northeast, climate has been changing very rapidly over the last 3 or 4 decades. We've seen annual temperatures warm by almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the 1970s. Our winters have been warming at almost twice that rate. We're seeing decreases in winter snowpack. We're seeing plants flowering earlier. And we're seeing extreme precipitation events and extreme heat in summer increasing. Thanks for turning the lights down. And what we've done with this report is we've looked at 2 possible futures. We've looked at a future in which we continue our heat-trapping emissions at current levels, and we call this the high emission scenario. And then we've looked at an alternative future where we actually curb our emissions, we change to renewable energies, we really put in some very good policies that will reduce our emissions in the short term. And we call this the low emission scenario. Now, these climate projections are taken from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which was published by the United Nations last year. It was over 2,500 scientists, of which I was one, involved in summarising climate science. And the two scenarios were taken from that report and downscaled to the northeast. And what we're talking about is changing this blanket of heat-trapping gases, carbon dioxide in particular, to, under the low scenario, about double pre-industrial levels, and under the high scenario, almost triple pre-industrial levels. And I'll point out that neither of these pathways is a ceiling or a floor. In fact, we're actually tracking above the higher emission scenarios since 2005. So global emissions are now increasing at an unprecedented rate in geological history. The lowest emission scenario is not a flaw. We can come under that scenario, and a lot of our climate impacts work shows that to avoid even the worst kind of impacts, we will possibly need to do that. And it's a choice that you and I have today. So this is what we're choosing between two very different futures. Certainly, climate change is affecting the most vulnerable in our communities, both at a global level and at a local level. And certainly the people who are least able to pay are the people who are least responsible for it. So our adaptation needs to be smart, and it needs to be in tandem with mitigation. Over on the table there'll be copies of the report and of the state summary, so please feel free to take one of these. There's enough state summaries for everyone, and there should be enough reports probably for half of you. So, and if you require more, I'd certainly be happy to speak to you and to provide you with more information. So let's try and take that middle road, and thank you very much for your attention.